Hi everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of July the 20th, 2020. We have a really powerful and active sky where the star of the celestial show is without a shadow of a doubt Monday's new moon taking place in the sign of Cancer. But even besides that, we have a lot of very active celestial conversations taking place in the sky, and also around the 22nd of July we have the sun moving into the sign of Leo, and that represents this week's major energy shift. Now it is absolutely true that we don't have that many new celestial conversations, but the ones that we are used to already, the ones that have been influencing us all throughout this week and the last couple of weeks, well, some of them are breaking away, so their influence is diminishing, while others are perfecting, so their influence is getting stronger. So this also represents a change of dynamics, even though as I said earlier, we don't have that many new and fresh energies except the new moon. But if we get to the symbolism of that new moon, well, that is also new, but at the same time it can also have some old lingering energies attached to it, which have to come to the surface, which have to be processed, and they're either psychological, mental, or even karmic. Resolution is going to promote that new beginning or that fresh and new whatever has to enter our lives. Of course, depending on where the sign of Cancer falls into our own personal charts. Now, if you're wondering how this new moon phenomenon on the 20th of July can play out for you personally, we have a specially dedicated video analyzing this new moon in Cancer, and there I give examples of how this phenomenon can play out in your life depending on the positioning of your houses. So you can check that out if you're inclined to, if you're curious. But either way, this new moon, as in the conjunction of the sun and moon, is standing across the sky from Saturn. So either way, it will have either some compromise attached to it, or a major reality check, or maybe a sacrifice, a work, something that we have to do in return. But it can also represent a karmic closure, a karmic harvest, a karmic reward for all the past work and sacrifices we have done. Because all of that is linked to the symbolism of Saturn, but at the same time, this phenomenon takes place around 28 degrees and 26 minutes of the sign of Cancer, so it almost touches what astrologers call the anaretic degree, the last degree of any sign, which represents a culmination, a gathering of energies, a closure, a karmic discharge, or because of the tension accumulated here, it can also represent the shadow expression of that energy. So either way, because it's taking place in 20 degrees, almost 29 degrees of the sign of Cancer, so it has a lot of culmination, a lot of tension attached to it, so it has to offer either a solution, a closure, moving on, or a new beginning, which is very, very needed, desperately needed, for example. Or maybe one that, even though it represents a wonderful opportunity, well, because of that opposition with Saturn, opposition to Saturn, and this opposition is almost exact, so it's very, very relevant and very important. So that new beginning, even though it's wonderful, fantastic, muchly needed, it can still have a compromise, a sacrifice attached to it. Like, let me just give you an example. Maybe someone is looking for a new job, new career, maybe their place in the world, or somewhere where their soul feels at home, comfortable, etc. This might be one of their big dreams in life, and this new moon can actually create this opportunity. They might receive an offer or a relevant new social connection, or soul level connection, a friendship, alliance, anything that has to do with it can enter their lives, and it's wonderful because the opportunity is already there. But if that opportunity requires them to leave their families, for example, or the place where they live in the present moment, well, that can be a very hard decision, a very hard choice to make, even though it's a dream come true. But maybe some people might not be ready to leave, for example, their families, all their friends, their job, their, normality behind, even though this new beginning is something that they have always dreamed of. But you need know this is where the symbolism of Saturn gets into play, because Saturn can represent obligations, moral duties, and a person not willing to sacrifice the well-being they provide for their families or their partners or whatever in order for their own personal dream to come true. So even though this can represent a massive and fantastic new beginning, it's not gonna be very, very easy, because it will require a very strong decision or a sacrifice or everything that has to do with the symbolism of Saturn. But also, this is an opposition, so it can play out in a totally different way, because, an opposition is where two planets, or the symbolism of two signs, is trying to reach balance, equilibrium, but that balance depends very much on your present moment circumstances and your inner truth, basically, because you are the one who has to decide in which way this balancing can be ideal for you, can offer you comfort, where you can just thrive. Because for very many people, balance doesn't mean 50-50. It means however it advantages their lives, their personality, their own psychology, the person who they are, as they embody the symbolism of Saturn. So for example, for some people who have been hard workers all their lives and didn't get that much in return ever, it doesn't matter the reason why, well, that is already represents that the relation between Cancer and Capricorn in their lives, in their psychology, is very disadvantageous for them personally. So a karmic culmination for them should be the total opposite, where something wonderful just comes in their lives and all they have to do is accept it, because this is what balance means. And for some people might think, oh, how wonderful. But for those people who have lived like this all their lives, where they just put in titanic efforts into everything and didn't get that much in return, well, for them it's not very easy to accept any blessing, because life trained them to be very, very disciplined, self-sufficient, and not accept anything for free, because that is the major lesson that they have embodied. And even though if the universe right now wants to reward them or convince them that something entering your life as a blessing, a free blessing, a fruit for your hard labor, is something to be accepted, something to be, an opportunity to be lived with, to be seized, because of the inner limitations and the inner discipline, because they embody such a very strong Saturnian spirit, well, there's no guarantee that they can accept it, because they might say, well, I don't need it anymore because I am very self-sufficient, I am strong enough, I am enough for myself, and they can just refuse it, even if it's just a karmic reward. They'll just say, well, thank you very much for the consideration, but I don't need it. Other people can have a very low self-esteem, so they might think, well, I don't deserve this, this is too big for me, this is a life, for example, a life of luxury is not for me. So that Saturn represents very many things for all of us, and also the 28th degree of Cancer represents something totally different. So the compromise, the challenges, the obstacles, or the sacrifice might be very, very personal, depending on your history, depending on your personality, on your psychology, and what kind of attitude you have towards the symbolism of Saturn and Cancer. And another expression of this energy can be quite negative for certain people. For example, people who always evaded the law, who always performed illegal activities, for example. People who have a history, of cheating, deception, crimes, stealing, taking advantage of another, or people who simply don't like to work, who don't like to sacrifice anything, who are very, very self-centered, self-absorbed. Well, for them, this can also be a karmic harvest, but it's not gonna be anything pleasant, because they will harvest the main lesson, they will harvest the opposite of what they have done all throughout their lives, or even just a 6 months period, a 6-month cycle. So, even though if it's a full moon, so it should represent something fresh and new, but that can be also a karmic challenge. That can also be a big hardship, for example, which will train you how to embody spirit of duty, honor, dignity, etc. And we can also see this playing out on the world stage, because yes, the main opposition is with Saturn, but the Sun also opposes Jupiter and Pluto, and their opposition was perfected last week. So we could see a lot of secrets, legal matters, a lot of, skeletons in the closet coming out for world leaders, very important people, a lot of disclosures, a lot of changes in legislation. Jupiter opposing Sun. Jupiter in Capricorn can be, the justice and legislation, that has to do with centralized power. Sun in Cancer, how people feel towards it. So, when people express their sovereign wills that they do not accept the legislation, well, it doesn't really matter how logical or illogical it is the will of the people. So centralized power had to make compromises, otherwise they would have had a lot of trouble on their hands. And in some parts of the world, that is exactly how it played out. They rejected the will of the people, and of course, it happened. Whatever had to happen happened, because the Sun is in Cancer, is definitely the symbolism of unity, solidarity, people coming together as in a family, as in soul family. They share the same values, moral values, familiar values, cultural, ancestral heritage values, values of their local communities. So, this solar activity in the sign of Cancer definitely represented a greater celestial inspiration of unity and emotional solidarity between, people. And this celestial setup is really familiar to me, because in my country, in my culture, there was a massive overturn of the government in 1989, when the communist regime fell and people rose up and there was a massive, massive revolution. Well, we had Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, so it empowered people in a way where they just couldn't fear for their safety, for their lives anymore, because they were so oppressed, as in Saturn was in the sign of Capricorn opposing Jupiter in Cancer. So a rebellion, a revolution, an overturn of the government, where the power of the people becomes sovereign, was almost unavoidable. And even though right now we only have the Sun in the sign of Cancer, but we do have that Saturn in Capricorn, and we have Jupiter also in Capricorn, and because it opposes with the Sun, well, it can trigger the same kind of reaction. So, globally, this is definitely one of the ways through which this energy is going to play out. The opposition of the Sun in Cancer and Saturn in Capricorn, well, that simply represents the emotional reaction to people, to citizens, to the rules and regulations and the restrictions. And Saturn is also the symbol of the professional, the leader, the teacher. So basically, doctors, medical or economic, any kind of professional which works for the government, like the ministers, the representatives of centralized power fall into this category. So if people are dissatisfied, well, they're definitely going to express it. But this is one of the moments when, the inner tension, the emotional tension builds up, because after all, this is water energy, so it's not fire energy. If it would be a fire sign, it takes is a little spark and spirits are ignited and they explode. And we're definitely gonna have that in the autumn, or even better said, even towards the middle of August, when Mars is going to conjunct Eris and they will both square Pluto in Capricorn. So that will be exactly what I said, a little spark igniting the spirit and a big explosion. It's like a volcanic reaction. But with water energy, it has to build up. It's like when the pipe is blocked and the pressure just has to build and build and build, and then it explodes. So this particular new moon, in my opinion and in my vision, is exactly that, when the pressure will start getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And even if the conduct is metal, as in centralized power, the rules and regulations, the military intervention, for example, which makes sure that the pressure doesn't, destroy the pipe and the water doesn't burst out, well, that is gonna withstand this pressure until it can, but ultimately it is going to lead to the inevitable if things don't change. Because of course, you have all this pressure building up in the pipe, but someone can come and fix it. Someone can, maybe a plumber knows some kind of trick to prevent the inevitable. So, if centralized power are very aware of where all of this is leading and going, well, they can fix it, they can compromise, they have so many tools to, release a little bit of pressure. And this is the blessing, with water energy when it's getting too much, because you do have that time, that window of opportunity to prevent it, to fix it before it gets too late. But when it comes to fire energy, now that cannot really be prevented, because as I said, the spark lights gasoline and there it is. But regardless of this, the sun represents the light of our consciousness, and the moon is actually the ruling planet of Cancer. So this is a very strong new moon, so to speak, as in just the conjunction of the sun and the moon. So whatever we are going to see playing out on the world stage, for example, the Jupiterian type of events, as in the exposure of the truth, secrets, trials, legal cases, or Pluto, some very, very dark secret or crimes of sexual nature being exposed, well, even if the pressure is released to prevent the pipe from exploding, people are still gonna remember this. So okay, the pressure can be managed, but they will not forget what they saw. And this is how it all leads up to the middle of August, when I said Mars conjunct Eris square Pluto, and that is just the first square. And at the same time, a totally different way how to look at this energy. Well, Cancer is fertile, it is fertility, it is the sign of the mother. And new moon is new beginning, so that is even a more fertile energy. So, opposition with Saturn, because of the restriction, because of how things are in the present moment on the world stage, in physical, material reality, economic, social, even religious climate, how things are. Well, it can give birth to new alliances, new smaller groups. It basically can change the way people associate with each other, because chances are, in order to find strength in unity, they might really put aside their personal differences, their philosophies, their life views, and just, ally with each other in order for them to survive and have a saying. But this is just the new moon, this is just Monday. But of course, the symbolism of every new moon can take up from a week to 6 months to fully manifest and enter our lives. And even though this 28, almost 29 degree speaks of a sense of urgency, speaks of a greater dynamic, for us personally, it might take some time until this manifests, so there's no real rush. Collectively, however, I do sense that this is going to play out much faster than a new moon usually does. So let's just watch what happens, and remember, we must stay detached. We must acknowledge that in these very turbulent moments, it is our sacred duty, Saturn in Capricorn, to protect our beings in every single sense of the world emotionally, as in we don't allow toxicity to influence us. Mentally, we take care of how much news and social media or anything like that we consume, because it disturbs the mind. That's without a shadow of a doubt. And of course, spiritually as well, how much escapism are we using to survive this period? And materially, without a shadow of a doubt, we have to make all the right and wise and rational choices to protect our material situations. But moving on, we have a very powerful energy playing out in the sky, and it exacts around the 23rd of the month, where Mercury in the sign of Cancer is sextiling Uranus, its higher octave. Now this greatly empowers the mind, all of our emotional intelligence. It makes our mind almost quantic. Of course, this type of conversation is not that very special, because one way or another, in various different formats, Uranus and Mercury speak in this manner every single year, sometimes even more than once. So this is just like a divine download, an inspiration, an inner epiphany. Or it could be, Mercury in Cancer, your loved ones, family, friends, soul connections, communicating, inspiring you, being there for you, emotional comfort. It can be vice versa, where you are the source of inspiration and emotional comfort. It can also represent a rather unexpected, surprising financial opportunity, because Uranus is still in the sign of Taurus, and Taurus rules values, including money. So that can be like an unexpected gain, but it will need you to be in top form, rationally, to embody the most highest qualities of Mercury, as in always stay rational, always stay logical. But of course, don't overthink, don't overdo it. Just do what feels natural. And Mercury in the sign of Cancer is also a very intuitive energy, so your intuition can help you as well. But either way, it also speaks about ingenuity, creativity, where you might have all the right ideas, the most ingenious solutions, brainstorming, getting out of your comfort zone and sharing something that you create, something that you're good at. For example, starting a very unusual business that just entered your mind, your awareness suddenly, and you don't even have to be alone, because Mercury in the sign of Cancer can represent allies or people who your idea would inspire and they would join you and help you. So this is a really, really positive energy from so many different perspectives. But unfortunately, we also have a hard aspect that we are really familiar with, because it takes us back to the Venus retrograde period, where Venus, first of all, before she went retrograde in the sign of Gemini, she formed a celestial conversation of tension, a square with Neptune, and that really, really confused us. Then again, after she went retrograde, she resumed this type of celestial conversation with Neptune, but because Venus was retrograde and Neptune was direct, this confused us even more, but not really through the usual symbolism of Venus, as in matters of the heart, who we love, what we love, our own relation with ourselves, self-love, self-worth, all of that. And it kind of really forced us to seek the truth, to find clarity, to find the highest expression of Venus in the sign of Gemini for us personally. But because of the events of the world stage, Neptune, of course, also represents illusions, deception, lies, manipulation, etc. So we were bombarded with a lot of fake truth, fake news, half-truths, and even truth throughout the media and all the available and possible channels, but that had a very, very negative and almost suffocating effect on us. That is when the waters of Neptune totally drowned us. But then Venus retrograde ended and Venus started going direct, and this is where she is going to hold for the third and final time this same square with Neptune, just that the energies are very different even in this present moment, because this is where Neptune is retrograde, so its symbolism is internal and Venus is direct. But this is actually a really good opportunity, because the highest expression of a square, well, it can represent motivation and, fighting and applying your truth, applying your wisdom, applying your experience. And that's why the past square which Venus held with Neptune was so very important, because it forced us to seek the truth, to seek greater clarity. First of all, everything that we love, what love means to us, our relation, internal relation, between the heart and the mind, which one rules us. And we were also invited to reach a state of equilibrium where there is no sovereignty of either the mind and the heart, only when they speak together in perfect harmony, when they understand each other, when they collaborate, when they live in a symbiotic relationship, can we actually embody our own inner truth, our healthiest sense of self-worth, our most authentic love. Because if we are guided just by the mind, well, that leaves no room for the heart, and that can lead to a lot of regret later on in life. And at the same time, if we just follow the impulses of the heart, well, you know what they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So a certain rationality and the double check of the mind is also needed. And this is how this square between Venus and Neptune played out the first time. And whatever lessons we learned, especially what love means for us, Venus retrograde, what we desire, what we wish, what we can accept, what we cannot accept, because this also includes all of our repulsions, everything that simply isn't us, and all our fake desires, our illusionary desires, our obsessions, which are actually binding us down, shackling us down, and forcing us to pursue them. But this is where we can finally learn the lesson that it's not true love, it is not true attraction, it has nothing to do with the heart really, it only has to do with the mind, because the mind twists and turns love and turns it into an unhealthy expression, an obsession, or over-ambitiousness, because that is also where we become our own slaves, the slaves of our desires. So the big picture of this Venus retrograde and also the square with Neptune was to free us from ourselves. The dual sign of Gemini is both ends of the spectrum. It is both freedom, but it can also show us when we are total slaves to ourselves, to our minds, especially the lower mind, the monkey mind. How our mind can in an instant, through a negative thought or a self-defeating thought, take away our happiness, our joy, our self-trust. But at the same time, there's another spectrum of this where toxic positivity and fake optimism can be just as devastating and as anything else, because a moment will come for the time of truth, and when we find out that we were feeding and fueling false hopes, well, of course that is going to be a very bitter moment for all of us. So the big picture of this Venus square Neptune was for us to find and then embody our truth, whatever love means to us, in the most healthiest ways possible. So that means surrendering obsessions, surrendering illusions, surrendering whatever is not authentic. It doesn't come from the heart, but it's just, for example, like a social influence, a programming that you receive through education, the influence of your parents and your family, etc. There can be so very many examples. Or, for example, another example, well, you see, some people have certain desires not because they need it, but because they suffered a lot of social injustice. For example, other people, their neighbors, the whole street, the whole school had certain kind of objects or luxury items, something which was a massive trend, but because of your situation, maybe you couldn't afford it, so you felt left out, and that can leave a certain kind of trauma and an obsession for you to, not be left out anymore. But that is not authentic desire and love. It is just the negative expression of Neptune. So this is the big picture. And right now, with this Venus square, this last and final Venus squaring Neptune, this is where we have to embody and use all these lessons, all this wisdom. Sometimes when we have a big goal and we truly, truly love it, the very core of our hearts, well, sometimes we have to be patient. We have to surrender that to the universe. Or if it doesn't depend on us, we can only try and try and try, and that's it. But of course, the biggest blessing in all of this, if we learn how to embody the healthiest symbolism of Venus and that Neptune as well, well, that means unconditional love. That means love, pure love for the source. And when we love the source, it loves us back 10 times more. It is healthy sense of self-worth. And it is knowing when to detach ourselves, when to disconnect from social media, from the internet, from the big truths of outer reality, and rather just learn to live within ourselves and take our own truth, whatever we love, out of the purity of our souls and hearts, Venus. That should be our own truth, and external reality should not be able to override that, because we are sovereigns of our own hearts and minds, and no one can tell us what we should love, what we should be attracted to, what is normal and right for us. We have to decide that for ourselves and no one else. And ultimately, that is the universe wanted to give us free will, because it doesn't want to interfere either. It wants us to be our ultimate judges. So yes, of course, for some people this can be a hard and tensioned time emotionally, because matters of the heart are always complicated. But for other people this can actually turn into ambition and determination to stay in their truth, to stay in their frequency of love, and just not allow anything to pollute it or to take away their true sense of self-worth and self-love. We also have another very positive and inspirational energy in the sky, and that is the sextile between Neptune and Jupiter, both retrograde, is getting stronger and stronger. And that can simply mean the power of dreams, the power of fantasy, the power of hope, the power of your inner truth just shining out and conquering even physical reality, embodying your healthiest faith. And that can be the biggest power in your life through which you can change anything. Because Jupiter in Capricorn is not very strong in this part of the sky. So it has no choice but to acknowledge limitations and to, you know, align with the material truth, what is possible in material reality. And Jupiter doesn't really like that because Jupiter is a bit excessive. Jupiter likes to believe in infinity, in the ultimate expression of everything, while Neptune is also very idealistic, especially that Neptune is extremely powerful in its home sign of Pisces. So the sextile between these two planets depends very much on your faith, what you believe, and how strong your belief is. But if it's strong enough, if you're a very imaginative person, this can turn into a wonderful blessing where through your beliefs, through your faith, whatever you invest your psychological energy into, well, you can attract it into your life as a magnet, especially that Pluto is in this picture as well, and Pluto is like ultimate power. Power even over fate, destiny, and Pluto in Capricorn even over physical reality and money. We have a couple of other sextiles in the sky. Venus sextiling Mars. Now this is a magnetic communication, magnetic personality, magnetic online presence. This energy can get a lot of things done, especially if you're a communicator, especially, you know, through your correspondence, communication, the information that you share, even your creativity that you share. And the sextile, as I said earlier, between Mercury and Uranus just complements this energy because it makes your mind that much quicker, that much stronger, and your emotions, Mercury and Cancer, are very, very sharp. And if this word is acceptable, even intelligent, because you know Mercury and Cancer is emotional intelligence, empathy and intuition, that very special sixth sense. So this absolutely makes Venus even stronger because she is basically the queen of the heart. So her symbolism depends very much on the level of power and clarity that we possess emotionally. And then of course the energy shift, the sun moving in the sign of Leo around the 22nd. This activates the symbolism of Leo, the sign of Leo, and this also somewhat complements the symbolism of Venus because Leo is the home of the sun. It is the heart space, the inner child, creativity, self-expression, love, falling in love. You know, it doesn't even have to be a person, it can be an activity, it can be absolutely anything that is susceptible to love. It can mean children, inner child, the sign of nobility, kings, VIPs. So whenever the heart is empowered and the light of our consciousness, the sun is there, and self-expression of course, well, that empowers whatever Venus wants to do in our lives because she is the queen of the heart. She is worth, value, self-love, everything that is needed for this big picture. So a lot of energy right now speaks about love, solidarity, unconditional love, the power of love, being capable of anything, and even, you know, they usually say mind over matter. This is when love over matter, love over anything. And last but not least, I would like to finish this horoscope with a minor astrological aspect that is going to be playing out in the sky, which also has much to do with Venus, because Venus from the sign of Gemini is going to form a quincunx with Jupiter in Capricorn. Now a quincunx is surprise, it is delight, it can be even the negative expression of surprise as in awkwardness, accident, but by accidents I don't mean physical accidents or getting hurt, but funny coincidences. It is basically divine humor, but sometimes divine humor can get a lot of things done. For example, Jupiter can be a highly influential person who helps you out unexpectedly, and their gesture, their offer of help can actually shock you or surprise you. It can take you unexpectedly, especially if this person owes absolutely nothing to you, or even if they're a total stranger. But this can be also surprising communication. It can be surprising offers of any kind, even job offers, which apparently have absolutely nothing to do with you and your skills, but you might still find it useful. It can also be a gain, a material gain, as in Jupiter, after all, is the higher benefic and Venus is the lower benefic. So this can mean a very lucky energy, but that luck is gonna be rather hidden. It won't be like straightforward, and your intuition might not really help you with this, because it will be like a surprise. You know, when the divine wants to surprise us, well, it's not gonna trigger our intuition to ruin the surprise, will it? It will stay hidden, it will stay silent, and then just surprise, surprise, and we get shocked. But it can also represent maybe an accident or an apparently not so fortunate event, as in an annoyance, a small mistake, a mistake in paperwork, or anything like that. And it can even source from the past, which can ultimately turn into a great advantage or a reward. So basically, when we have a quincunx, nothing is as it seems, and if we play along, usually it leads to the surprise, which can be either a big delight or something awkward. But either way, if nothing, it can lead to humor, laughter, a smile, or a shameful experience. But if that shame is just humorous and nothing serious, well, it's not going to be traumatic or anything. It will just ultimately make us smile at one moment in our lives. Or it can be a great story that we tell our grandchildren. But this energy has a lot of potential, just that we don't know how it's gonna play out exactly. But when it comes to the two benefics, well, you know, Jupiter retrograde, what you believe, your faith, your inner truth, your highest philosophies, can be very, very magnetic, and it can, you know, conjure up something in your life. Even if it's against all odds, this is also one of the ways a quincunx can play out. Well, thank you so much for listening. Wish everyone a blessed and very magical new moon. And also, remember to stay detached and don't get absorbed into the drama all throughout next week, because the conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto and their opposition to the Sun is definitely going to continue the major theme of revelations, exposures, disclosures, secrets coming out that might shock us, or they might stir a very strong emotional reaction. So it is very, very important to stay detached, because the time of big action is definitely not right now.